All right, so we are going to end this lecture by looking at two value surveys. And remember that because values can help predict consumer attitudes and behaviors, researchers have begun to develop and use these values surveys. So these are the two most valid and reliable ones to date, both used for the same purpose, to identify segments within a culture and connect their values to purchase behaviors. So this first one is Rokich's Value Survey, and now it's usually just referred to as VALS, V-A-L-S, VALS. The main thing to remember about the VALS is that it is used to segment populations by values and connect those values to buying behaviors, right? Now, you don't need to memorize this study, but I want to give you an example of how this is used. So researchers in the 1990s used this scale to identify three major segments of adult Brazilians. So segment A is a segment where individuals are primarily concerned with world peace, followed by inner harmony and true friendship. World peace, inner harmony, true friendship. They are the least materialistic, thus they're the least likely to buy new products. Their preferred activities tend to be reading, gardening, and visiting family. Segment B is more self-centered, achievement-oriented pleasure seekers. Now these are extravagant buyers of the latest fashions, the most likely to try new products. And then segment C are younger, more educated, and value things like inner harmony and freedom. Their preferred activities are artistic and cultural events, and they prefer to live in large cities. What's interesting here, I mean, obviously there are more segments in this, but these are like three main ones. But of these three, the largest of these is segment C, that younger, more educated group, but that is not the segment that spends the most money, even though it's the largest. Segment B spends the most money, as you might have guessed, because they tend to be more self-centered pleasure seekers. So we're going to actually revisit the VALS survey in more depth later this semester. But right now, the other most used values survey is similar, and it's called the LOV. List of values is what that stands for, the LOV. Remember now that this scale does the same thing, right? It has the same purpose to segment populations by values and link those values to consumer behavior. However, it's a little different in that it focuses on 9 different values, such as security, self-respect, excitement, sense of belonging, for example. So they're listed on here. You don't need to memorize all of these, but so you can get the idea of what these 9 are. So again, just for your interest, you don't need to memorize a study, but here's an example study which was conducted for a magazine seller using the LOV. And it found that people in the US most concerned with sense of belonging tend to be older and more likely to read Reader's Digest. Those who are most concerned with excitement were younger and preferred to read Rolling Stone magazine. By the way, the LOV here is actually easier to administer, and it seems to perform just as well as the VALS. However, the VALS is also a very popular value scale being used in consumer behavior and consumer psychology. Okay, so now for some tips on how to become a wiser consumer derived from this lecture material. 3 just to get you started. Tip number 1. When you're on the other end of consumer behavior, so maybe you're selling a house or selling a car, for example, remember the power of divestment rituals. Remember cleaning out your symbols, leaving it as a blank canvas. If you leave it as a blank canvas, clean out the symbols, it's easier for potential buyers to visualize their own symbols. So, for example, you would want to remove things like bumper stickers, hanging ornaments, even park permits from your car before showing it. Now, tip number 2. Remember the relative power of enculturation with family and media, right? They're the two strongest sources, family and media, in enculturing kids. So by limiting TV watching in your home to something less than the time the family spends together without media, you can affect the relative enculturation power of the family. Now, tip number 3 is a really cool one. Perform your own earwormectomy. This is the term for the removal of earworms. So the next time you have a jingle in your head and you cannot get it out and it's driving you nuts, here's 2 things to try. Interference by the same sensory system can be an easy first thing to try. Start humming another song that you like. Oftentimes that will work alone. But if not, scientists have found that solving anagrams, believe it or not, can remove more persistent earworms. You can download an anagram app, but something in psychology called the Goldilocks effect applies here. The anagrams cannot be too easy or too hard. Remember that from the Goldilocks story, right? This chair is too hard. This chair is too soft. This one is just right. Your anagrams need to be just right. And research has found that 5-letter anagrams work best. And that's usually an option with these apps. So you can choose 5-letter anagrams. This concludes our lecture on cultural influence today. And for your viewing pleasure, as promised, here's your end of lecture guerrilla marketing example. Very cool one.